Meet Reed Lance Rosenthal, rancher, #1 best-selling award-winning author, and unabashedly, unapologetically on the right side of the outstanding issues of our generation. But don't try to fence him in. Sometimes his positions will surprise you, because Reed is definitely his own man, with his own opinions. You might love him, you might hate him, but you won't be able to stop listening. Step over to the right side with Reed.
Howdy, viewers and listeners, coast to coast, the Gulf to the 51st state, and around the globe. Reed Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side Radio and the Cowboys Take on all those video channels everywhere. Please, if you're seeing me on video, you're watching my ugly mom, my lips yapping, give me a like, hit that bell for notifications, because I don't have an exact set schedule. I shoot for 2 a week, but sometimes it's just one. And depending upon what's happening with the ranch and the books and all sorts of other things, I try and do the same day, but it doesn't always happen. So that bell notification will let you know when it comes up, whatever site you're on, Rumble, Truth, X, Gab, Pradion, Brighteon, blah, blah, blah. And of course, YouTube, our friend, Google. They love us. All right, so today, I'm not going to do the real estate overview. Number one, there's new stats coming in from June that are not out yet, but they're going to be out in the next few days. So I'd be a month behind on giving you stats. I'll just tell you generally, there's a lot of markets that are going south. There's like no markets going north. And there's some markets kind of holding their own. But we'll go into that in detail. If not next week, then the week after. All depends when all this statistical information comes out. There's no sense giving you old hat. You need to know what's happening today, or as close to today as possible. So I'm going to have a little current events rat-a-tat-tat for you here up front. And of course, the ranch story, because the hay season is full of drama. And there's no way around it. Equipment and hay and rain and the whole 9 yards. And then I'm going to go into, as I promised to do about a week or two ago when it was finalized, Trump's quote-unquote big, beautiful bill, what it means for you, and what it means maybe on a larger context also. Because I don't see, I see people talking about tits and tats and tidbits and whatever, and, you don't have a full kind of clear, concise, one-stop go place for information. So I'm going to try and do that for you today. And I'm going to focus pretty much on what it does for your pocketbook, at least in a major sense. And hopefully that will help acquaint you with this 1,000-page bill that was passed just before July 4th and I believe signed on Independence Day, which was the original schedule. So good for them. We shall see what the effect of the bill is over time. All right. So first of all, the ranch story. So hay season is full of vagaries. It is full of surprises, many of them unpleasant. And it is full of some good stuff too. I mean, that work outside is great. And you're finding little nits and gnats on the ranch that even after, 20 years, you didn't know existed. You're getting ideas for next year's operations, how to expand the hay harvest acres. That's the acres you're actually harvesting, by increasing harvest on the hay base acres. Those are the acres that could be hayed. In the case of this ranch, it was kind of a mess when we got it. And it's been about, give or take, a 15-plus year capital improvements program, which is just now literally the period's going at the end of the sentence. And it's paid off big dividends. It's paid off big dividends in terms of value. It's paid off big dividends in terms of water, which is like really a big dividend. That's kind of the key to property out west, with the construction of a number of reservoirs. There's 8 reservoirs on this part of the ranch, 2 on the higher part of the ranch. And we've expanded the hay base from literally nothing up to about, by hay base, the hay harvest acreage, up to around 120 acres this year. And we have the potential to go over 160, and we're nibbling away at it each year. You try and do too much, you screw up. You want to see how a field works once you cut it. So all that's going super. And then you get into the actual operations during hay season. You know, number one, there's weather. So that shuts you down. You can't cut. Or you cut, it's supposed to be beautiful, and you get a downpour, and, you know, everything is slowed down, and you can't bale the hay, and you have to turn the hay, etc. Or you have an equipment breakdown, usually at the most inopportune time. Listen to my rant story in the last broadcast, which you probably get a chuckle out of. We raked out, there'll be a bunch of pictures here for you, as there has been the last 2-3 weeks, that the producers are going to put in while I'm talking about this rant story, so you can kind of see it and visualize it. My ranch lieutenant and I, in fact, primarily me, I did about 2/3 of it, hand turned with a pitchfork, big, thick, very heavy, wet windrows after that surprise rainstorm, so that we could spread them out and get them dry faster. And this had to do with the schedule of our hay folks, because they had other places they had to go, and now they're coming back here in just the next few days to get fields which have not even been swathed yet. And it was back-breaking work, probably a half a mile to 3/4 of a mile of windrows. You'll see the pictures. I mean, wow. I want to try and avoid that in the future. But once again, all of this is unavoidable because it's hay season and you can't control it. You're in the middle of nowhere in a wild environment, and it's going to do whatever it wants to do, whenever it wants to do it, as badly or as good as it wants to do it. All you can do is kind of plan, react, reformulate the plan, react, and get her done. Well, we finally got her done. Okay, we're out of room at the hay stack yard. One of the things which occurred here over the last week is that there's big spears that come out from the reach lift. One big one in the center and 2 smaller ones, which anchor the bale when you pick it up and stack it either on a semi, somebody else's trailer, your own trailer, bring it back to the stack yard, or stack at the stack yard. That center spear, after about 10 years, it's a great rig, finally kind of gave it up. And it got loose, and then it kind of broke. And literally the last 10 bales I picked up a couple days ago before we got it fixed. Why don't we say the bale at the end of the reach lift, right? Instead of being straight out, kind of looked like that. Kind of looked like a 90-year-old with a severe case of ED. Whatever that visual does for you. In any event, we have a good friend who's an absolute Class A welder. We talked him into coming out, traded him some time shed hunting up in the upper part of the ranch and some other stuff, and he did a beautiful job fixing it faster than anybody else could get out here, and way faster than bringing it into town, leaving it at a welding shop, because it requires a certain type of welding mechanism and materials that we don't have here on the ranch, above our pay grade. So that's fixed, and yesterday we picked up the bales off of one field, have water on it already. We actually have water back on 3 fields, one kind of feeble because there's not a lot of water, and one kind of rocking, and of course the pivot, which is great. In fact, we're about the only people that I know of for 50 miles in any direction that have second water, that is on a cut field, second water going. And that all goes back to those capital improvements in the reservoirs and the storage, etc. Anyway, the moral of this story is, when things go sideways, remember that adage, sunshine always follows rain, and keep your spirits up. As long as you apply yourself and you have a plan, even though you may have to alter it, you may have to call an audible signal and scrap the game plan, it'll all work out. And we are going to have a record hay year despite the absolutely incredibly dry conditions out here. Once again, thanks to the capital improvements in our water system, which is, all bias aside, maybe one of the best around, period. So that's your rant story, and that's your motto for the rant story today. Now let's talk about rat-a-tat-tat. All right, so number one, I told you about 2 or 3 shows ago that it was highly unlikely that Russia was going to go to the peace table for real in Ukraine. And you know what? What I told you was that's because China doesn't want them to. China wants the United States spread out, spending money as much as it possibly can be undermined, shall we say. And sure enough, on the 11th, that's just what, 36 hours ago, the foreign minister of China to the EU said that Russia, well, why don't we just say that China says that Russia can't lose the war or stop the war because the U.S. will then focus on China primarily. Gee, I guess I was a little prescient on that. But, you know, it's just common sense, right? It's just deductive reasoning. No great shakes to me. China. China is in trouble. It's in trouble economically. Its deflation, that's deflation, not inflation, is running at over I think it was 3.3% here in last week's report. Their economy is slowing. Their industrial capacity, not capacity, but output is slowing. Exports are slowing. There's all sorts of bad things going on, and this is despite massive amounts of stimulus that the Chinese central bank has pumped into that economy, kind of like, you know, our Fed does and all the other Feds around the world do. And China has a lot of debt. In fact, as a percentage of GDP, China is not far behind the United States, albeit a lower level of debt in terms of dollars or in terms of yen, whatever you want to look at, yen, in terms of yuan, whatever you want to look at it as. But the ratio, which is all important, 70% is about the break point. China is way over that, okay, as are we, as are most of the countries on the planet Earth. Other than Russia, you know, those sanctions must have worked really good on Russia, huh? Okay. What's going to happen with the Chinese economy? We don't know, but it's going to have worldwide effects, including the United States, as will the tariff war, we'll call it, between China and the United States. And true to form, Russia has kicked up its offensive actions in Ukraine, and its bombings, both drone, missile, whatever, are now as intense, if not more intense, than at any time since 2022 when this war started. So there you go. And Kiev is responding, Ukraine is responding with strikes on all sorts of things, particularly oil infrastructure, 800 to 1,000 miles past the Russian border. So don't look for that to settle down, folks. In the meantime, NATO has hundreds of thousands of troops which are massing. Kind of the spearhead is the Polish army in the Baltic states. And the prospects are not great, folks. The prospects are not great. The Chinese have been building amphibious landing ships like there's no tomorrow. And boy, they can crank out stuff. And they've built, from my information, several hundred just in the last 6 months. They had a massive exercise off of Taiwan, training, amphibious landings, Taiwan, etc., which means the United States is speeding more stuff from our pockets to Taiwan. And we have U.S. military in Taiwan training the Taiwanese military. Once again, I don't think China has to fire a shot to eventually get Taiwan, and they're pretty smart and they're long ball players. But you should know that the South Pacific is definitely, if it's not at a boil, it's at a strong simmer. The BRICS countries met in Brazil, July 6th and 7th. Brazil was the host nation. Last year, Russia was the nation. If you go back into the archives on the rightsideradio.com, I bring you completely up to speed on what's happening with the BRICS. And, the shall we say, inter-country payment system. We call ours the SWIFT system. Theirs is called the Enbridge system. Remember, I brought you this story like 6 weeks ago, and now there's some mainstream media figuring it out. Wow. And that is their system has now surpassed in terms of the value of daily transactions, whether it's in yuan or whether it's in renminbi or whether it's in US dollars, whatever currency format you want to use, it has now surpassed the SWIFT system. In fact, it happened April 12th, very quietly, but very demonstrably. This is a huge shift in the hegemon status in the world. It's a huge shift and a bellwether of the shift from a unipolar to a multipolar world. Okay. Zoran Mandami. You know, I bet you he and Obama are best of friends because he is a radical Islamist communist. They're two peas in a pod. And he's the guy who won the primary, even though it was split three ways, in New York to run for mayor. And some of the stuff out of his mouth it literally is right out of Karl Marx's manifesto. Let me give you two quotes in the last week. Number one, rent control, because rich landlords need to give back to poor tenants. Now, we all know what rent control will do. It'll shut down rentals. You'll have less rentals. You'll have more government control of rentals, and the whole situation will spiral out of control. You will also have a whole bunch of people leaving New York with their pocketbooks. They won't be leaving New York. They'll be flying away from New York. That's already happened to some extent, but now it's going to go on steroids. The other thing he said was that his intent is, and I quote, at the end, was to control, quote, was to control all means of production, unquote. In other words, basically the New York City government will control anything and everything that has to do with sales, grocery stores, for instance, or manufacturing, or the disposition of goods and services, or the provision of services. They will control all means of production. Like I said, right out of Karl Marx's handbook, right? Now, you may think he's a one-off, but I'm going to bring you a story. I'm going to bring you a show here in the next 3 or 4 weeks. I'm going to acquaint you with people just like him all around the United States, in positions of power, in state legislatures, in state governments, in municipalities, who think just like he does. He's just more outspoken, and the mainstream media loves him, and AOC quacks about him and whatever. This is a growing trend, folks, and I want to try and bring it to you and reveal it so you know what's going on. This is not a one-off, oh, New York City, those fools, those lefties, who cares if he gets... No, this is much more serious than that. This is a canary in the, shall we say, political coal mine, in the freedom coal mine, actually. Okay. And then the courts. Oh, yes, the Obama and the Biden, which is really Obama third term, courts, and a few Clinton judges thrown in there for good measure. Despite the Supreme Court, I brought you those cases last week. Listen to it. That'll bring you up to speed on what the Supremes have going and what they've ruled. They said if you're district court, get it together. You can't be throwing out nationwide injunctions. Your power is limited. I mean, it's as clear as day was their order. We have 2 courts since then basically saying F you to the Supreme Court of the United States. One passed an injunction against ICE deporting and arresting illegals in LA. Okay. The other shut down Trump's birthright deal, which basically narrows the band for getting automatic citizenship as a birthright in, I better plug this in too, automatic citizenship as a birthright here in the United States, okay? So he shut it down nationwide, like a double FU to the Supreme Court. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. All right. And I'll keep you up to speed on all that. Now, for the big, beautiful bill and what it means for you and your family. So the big, beautiful bill, as Trump has named it, was signed on Independence Day. And it really has significant impacts on many Americans' personal finances. The legislation locks in Trump's 2017 tax cuts, makes them permanent, introduces new tax breaks and deductions for tips, overtime pay, $6,000 deduction for Social Security. I'm going to go over these in detail for you so that you have it kind of all in one place. Number one, tax cuts. So on tax cuts, as I try to keep this together here, it's the extension of the hat cuts. That's the heart of the bill. And that bill was called back in 2017 the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. Most of the brackets saw 2 to 4% cut in base tax rate. Those stay in place. They were set to expire in 2025 if the big, beautiful bill had not passed. And that would have resulted in taxes for more than 60% of tax-paying Americans. And that's according to a 2024 Tax Foundation report. The standard deduction under this new bill that just got passed is going to increase to $15,750 for a single filer, $31,500 for married couples filing jointly. The estate and gift tax exemption. In the first bill back in 2017, Trump raised it, I'm rounding numbers, from $5 million to $11 million. It's now been raised again, $15 million tax-free out of your state. If you're single, $30 million for couples. The child tax credit went from $2,000 to $2,200 per year, and additionally, starting in 2025, up to $1,700 that can be reimbursed in cash, no matter what your income. So, kind of a play on the how do we call it? On the free money, yeah. Okay, we have the Trump accounts. Very interesting. Children born between 2025 and 2028, the government will deposit in an account in their name $1,000. Every eligible child who's a U.S. citizen. Parents can contribute $5,000 a year tax-free annually. And their investments will grow in that fund that tracks a U.S. stock index. I don't know how good that's going to be over the next year, but we'll see. And employers, you might think about this with your bosses if you are an employee. Employers can contribute $2,500 to this newly formed tax-free savings account. So you can build up quite a nest egg for your kids tax-free. When you withdraw from the account, it will be taxed not as ordinary income, like the current stuff, or a lot of the current stuff, but as capital gains, which of course is a much lower rate. By the way, I didn't see a lot, although I'm not all the way through 1,000 pages. I did not see a lot of of changes of any magnitude to capital gains, so at least not yet. If I do, I'll let you know. Families who are raising kids who are under 17, the deduction, the tax credit, is that child tax credit will raise to $2,200. You can get some of that back in cash. I already said that. And this change, by the way, doubles down on the change that his 2017 bill did, which was raise child tax credits from $1,000 to $2,000. So they continue to go up over the new bill. Workers who make tips or get overtime pay, this bill is really good for you. So if you get tips, you can deduct up to $25,000 a year of tip income right off the top of your federal taxes, pay no tax on it. It phases out. If you're making more than $150K single or $300K as a couple, it phases out. It also phases out in 2028, just FYI. If you're working overtime hours, which is time and a half or double time or whatever deal you have with your employer, you get the same kind of fairly short term, but really nice little tax kiss. Single filers can deduct up to $12,500 of overtime pay right off the top of their taxes, no tax owed. Couples can deduct $25,000 right off the top. The deduction phases out for, when you start getting into the higher incomes. Car buyers, this is a really interesting one, and this goes back to what Trump wants to do, bringing manufacturing back in the United States, which is the thrust of his tariffs plus income to the United States. By the way, as an aside, did you know that the United States of America in July showed an actual monthly budget surplus of about $42 billion. It's a drop in the bucket to $37 trillion, but it's the first surplus, I think, going back to Bill Clinton. And the reason was a whole bunch of tariff income. So Trump, when he said this will help the budget deficit, he's exactly right. And I brought you that story, I think, 4 or 5 months ago when everybody was screaming and yelling. Oh, no, it was April, that's right, at his Liberation Day, when everybody was screaming and yelling about the tariffs. Inflationary and won't help. Well, they're deflationary and they will help. We'll see how it all boils down, but that's where we're at right now. Okay, back to our big, beautiful bill discourse. So if you buy a vehicle between the years 2025 and 2028, in normal times, you couldn't deduct that interest unless your company's buying and it's for business, et cetera, et cetera. Now you can, as an individual, deduct up to $10,000 of the interest you pay on your loan. I don't know if it applies to leases, on your loan when you buy a car. That's kind of cool, particularly if you need to buy a car. That phases out, by the way, if you're making more than $100K as an individual or $200K for a married couple. And one other big requirement, the vehicle that you buy must be manufactured in the United States of America. Nowhere else, not Mexico, not Canada, not Europe, not anywhere. This bill raises the cap on what they call the SALT, the SALT tax. Remember the big hue and cry when he was in office before, where he lowered your ability to deduct on your federal income taxes any of the state income and property taxes, et cetera, that you pay in your state. Obviously, that hurt the people in blue states, particularly New Jersey, highest tax rate in the United States, California, New York, Illinois, just list the blue states. They have high taxes because they're kind of like the guy running for mayor in New York. Take from you and give to them to buy their votes. The SALT cap has now been raised from $10,000 to $40,000. Starts in 2025. It phases out in 2029, and it reverts to $10,000 in 2030. This is a pretty big deal for people in those very high tax, very blue states. Yes. The other thing you guys can do is move out of there. Think about it. Okay. The expanded deduction, however, phases out if you're making $500,000 or more per year. Seniors, okay, they had originally talked about eliminating taxes entirely on Social Security. That didn't get done. What they did do is that the first $6,000 of your Social Security is tax-free. Right now, you're taxed on it. It's part of your tax computations. Now it's free. It's just like you made a tip, or it's just like you got paid overtime, as we just discussed. The deduction, by the way, phases out for individuals who are making more than $75K or couples making more than $150K, and it's not available to single filers, that's one person filing their taxes, that are earning more than $175K, or joint filers earning more than $250K. It's still the Social Security Studies Institute estimates that this will lower taxes for 60%. That's a lot. 60% of Social Security beneficiaries out there, and there's a bunch of them. Social Security recipients, by the way, will save a total, this is pretty big numbers, of $30 billion a year in taxes with this one change in the bill. $30 billion back into the pockets of senior Americans. It does, however, they say in this study, accelerate the insolvency dates. That's right, when the money runs dry and it's all done. It accelerates the insolvency dates for Social Security and the Medicare Trust Fund by about a year. So there's a dark cloud on the horizon. Student borrowers. Student loan borrowers, it's kind of a mixed bag. Pell Grants, which help you go to like voc tech schools, schools which aren't, turning you into a doctor or a lawyer or, a woke, whatever. Those are expanding, which is great because we need more people in the blue collar trades. We need less people in the white collar trades, as they will find out as AI kicks in. Graduate students will be restricted to $20,500 per year and a lifetime maximum of $100,000 in borrowing. Professional degrees, like for law and medicine and that kind of stuff, they will face caps of $50,000 a year and $200,000 over their lifetime. Parent borrowing, there's a program where parents can borrow on behalf of their kids. It's called the Parent Plus Loan Program. That's now reduced and limited to $20,000 per year per kid, a lifetime ceiling of $65,000. In the meantime, interest accruals on all these loans after Obama's third term, when they tried to forgive him and et cetera, has now kicked back in. So people who are paying on these loans, and that started in May, I brought you the story, and it's going to have and is having all sorts of economic ripple effects. Those payment plans now include accrued interest, which have been basically stopped since 2020. Medicaid, this is pretty interesting, and the Democrats are all over this. Oh, they're stripping health care from the American, whatever. I have articles on the website, on the rightsideradio.com. You can find them under Family Safety, Rat-a-tat-tat, under the audio bar if they're really good. And if you look at Trump resistance, you'll see all the garbage the Democrats are throwing out. A modicum of truth with a mountain of garbage. Anyway, the significant changes to Medicaid, which will save, they say, about $1 trillion in cuts over the next decade, will mean that if people don't gear up for the new requirements to be on Medicaid, that about 10 million people will lose coverage. And the biggest part of this, if you will, tightening up the system, is now there's work requirements for able-bodied adults. That saves $326 billion. Tighter limits on how states can fund their programs through provider taxes. In other words, taxing hospitals and then the states, it's all one big circle jerk. I mean, it's so corrupt. That's $191 billion, and much more strict rules for state Medicare payments, $149 billion. And there's an analysis, I think they'll have it on the website, by the Kaiser Family Foundation, which really goes into the nitty-gritty and the details of this. The cool thing about this is that obviously this will affect government payments to rural hospitals, which are key. Like in this area, there's a great hospital, it's like 50 beds, tiny, really, and it's terrific. And people come from 200 miles in every direction to it, and it has great staff, great doctors. This bill allocates $50 billion to support rural hospitals, just like the one in this area, to take the edge off losing these other subsidies and government payments. The SNAP program, which is the food stamp program. Number one, you have to be a U.S. citizen now. Wow, what a novel concept. Amazing. Saves billions and billions a year. States, if you're a blue state and you're jumping up and down, oh yeah, people need the food stamps. Well, guess what? Now you're going to have to contribute 5 to 15% of all SNAP benefits that are given out in your state. And you have to cover 75% of all the administrative costs, which are huge, instead of the former 50%. So blue states, be careful what you ask for. Work requirements are expanding. If you're an adult age 55 to 64. It's a new age category. And parents with children age 14 or older, you have to be actively looking for work or be employed. Urban Institute did a study on this. About 5.3 million households are affected by this new work requirement. And, I think it's great. I mean, if you want to be on the government dole, that's great. Then at least do what you can to not be on the government dole or to lessen the government dole. You owe it to your fellow Americans. This is not to pay you to eat pizza, sit in your basement, and do video games. Anyway, there's about 5.3 million households. If they don't get their caca together, they'll see their benefits drop by about $25 a month, which is not earth-shattering, but it's still $25 a month. And average monthly losses, benefits they're not getting by about $146 a month. And then you have the small businesses and the gig workers, right? And this is what they call the Section 199A deduction pass-through for gig workers and small businesses. So this was originally enacted in Trump's 2017 tax cuts. And this allows business owners, self-employed, to deduct up to 20% of their qualified business income. And the deduction was set to expire in 2025. It's now permanent, which is great under the new law. So basically, if you own your own business, you can take 20% of your profits. I'm making it really simple. 20% of your profits right off the top of the tax return. That's a lot of money. And guess who employs more people than all the big monster companies put together? That's right, small business. So a nice shot in the arm for employment around the United States also. So that is there's a lot more than 1,000 pages, obviously. But those are the key items that I picked out, which I think will affect, in some way, shape, or form, many of you who are listening to this broadcast and or podcast and or video. And hopefully that helps solidify things. Once again, a bunch of articles on the website, on therightsideradio.com. You can read about this in detail and other things I didn't mention because that wasn't the gist of this particular episode. And I will talk to you in a few days. Actually, I'll talk to you in about 5 or 6 days because I'll be signing books. We have a book signing coming up at the Frontier Cheyenne Days in Cheyenne, which I believe starts the 17th, somewhere in there, right in that neighborhood. And come on down, say hi if you happen to be in that area. We have hundreds of thousands of Threads West and American Saga readers in Wyoming and Colorado. I'm looking forward to seeing you folks. In the meantime, the rest of you, keep the wind at your back, and we'll talk to you in a few days. This is Reed Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side Radio and the Cowboys Take.
Please remember, if you've missed any shows, just click on Show Archive and you'll find all of his shows. We look forward to seeing you here again next week for another episode of Reed Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side.